Oh hell, internet. Welcome to my therapy session, I guess. About 3 years ago, I made a video called The Show and Why It Blows, and I directly referenced George Carlin, who famously said that he gave up on his species and is just here to watch the show. A fascinating idea, and I appreciated the way that George Carlin made us laugh at the absurdities of the show. But I said then, and years later, I still feel this resentment for the idea of giving up on one species, because it is, broadly speaking, how I feel, and nobody's been able to give me a good answer on why I shouldn't feel this way. And furthermore, I get pushback when I want to talk about subjects that make you kind of fear for the future of the species. As important as everybody says they are, nobody wants to talk about them directly and frankly in everyday conversation, which just seems a little irresponsible, I don't know. And of course that includes me, and we have to, get on with people in everyday life. I'm not saying that we should just go like a bull in a china shop, and there's a lot going on. Everyone has problems. I understand that. I experience that, and I have empathy with that, I think. But there's a question underlying. Why is it so hard? Why is it difficult for good-hearted and conscientious people around the world to have these conversations? One could rephrase it as, who's making it so hard? And we'll go on to talk about education a bit later on, a little. But education is the answer, and at the risk of sounding elitist, the answer is philosophy, just like Plato said. Well, not just like Plato said. But the point is, this should not be elitist, it should be normal. Philosophy should be taught from the first year of secondary school, period. And the framing should be, you should not, and indeed must not, be afraid to think seriously about your life, even if you don't receive clean and satisfying answers to every question. Because the world very rarely gives us clean and satisfying answers to every question, and we should not be afraid of going forward with that fact. To be fair, some argue against Plato, like Robert Pirsig in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. He wasn't completely against some of the ideas of Plato and craftsmanship, but he did defend the sophists, Plato's arch enemies, and their rhetoric skills. But where I'm coming from is that at this point in history, we have reached a point where humanity can and should make sure that a whole population is educated to a certain standard to be able to think seriously about certain things. And the difference is something I can sum up in 3 words, which is the modern mass society. And this is something I'm going to say again and again, in that humanity has got a difference in scale now that has become very much a difference in kind. And so the way that we live life in the modern mass society has to change. And the point is not that the past was bad. There may be bad people or bad actions in the past, but obviously that is not going to affect the whole of the past. But the modern mass society brings changes which are inevitable and necessary for flourishing, but at the same time they are going to appear radical to those who are in an old-fashioned tribal way of thinking. And tribalism is something that's brought up as a problem time and again by people who are thinking seriously about this issue, but nobody ever seems to kind of get it into the mainstream. The point is, though, that many of the mechanisms and systems that have quite rightly led us through the tribal phase of history are now reaching a breaking point. They're reaching a point where they become so obviously unfit to deal with the modern mass society that there's no way that they can be defended as an absolute. And that's why we end up with these so-called polarized times. And everyone says that the times are polarized, but nobody seems to have a solution. I don't blame anyone for this particularly. I might throw a few wry looks around, but I don't have a solution. The left thinks the right is crazy. The right thinks the left is crazy. You can tell from my phrasing, I think they're both a little bit crazy sometimes, but I definitely and have described myself as left in the past, and I stand by that. I'm very much left-wing politically and socially. But I see things that the left is doing that make me think, really? You know, is that necessary? But if we are truly polarized, then both extremes are, by definition, extreme. And my point is that both extremes are obviously indefensible these days, you know, because they are all extremes that are associated with the old tribal mindset. So then, are we never to have the uncomfortable conversations about this? And don't worry, they will be uncomfortable for everyone. You know, as a fence sitter, this fence is just as uncomfortable as it looks. You know, the fence sitters think both sides make some interesting points, and they want that to be integrated into where we go forward. I thought that's what representative politics was supposed to be about, that everyone gets some of what they want. But if we aren't looking for the literal extinction of the opposition, then both sides have to give somewhere. That's how spectrums work. But that doesn't mean that the fence sitters in the middle get everything that they want. They will have to concede things in both directions, and that's why they generally get the hatred of both sides. So as I move into my sort of 9 or 10 different rants, I want to be clear. If there is an idea of where we should end up, then a good 50% of what I say here is likely to be wrong, and I think that's okay. I might think that I am speaking sensibly, but if there's somebody out there who can make me go, huh, then, you know, I'm open to that always. But to refuse to talk about it, to consider that in the modern mass society it's possible to never have these conversations, is insane. And to think that you will never have to move on any issue at all, equally so. Your perspective is wrong somewhere, as is mine, and aren't you just the least bit interested to know where that is? Because in analysing our own perspective, we're really analysing humanity's perspective. Humanity as a race can be considered an individual, and that individual is made up of different individuals, and that second individual is made up of other individuals, and individuals perhaps all the way down beyond the level that we would think of as an individual. Is your heart a different individual to your brain or your gut? But if we go above the human level, mass individuals are just the same. They have their own hang-ups and foibles and traumas they have experienced. And the tribal tendencies that we carry from the previous phase of history are stopping us from seeing humanity in that way, which is where we need to go in the modern mass society. We all want to believe that our group is special, i.e. right, and every other group is somehow flawed, somehow wrong. I am not immune to this at all, but I try and make it an article of faith that no one individual is special, either a mass individual or an individualized individual. And at this point, people on the right might start going, oh, he's a communist of some kind. No one is special does not mean everyone is the same. This is the kind of nuance that people routinely and I think often willfully ignore, and it's one thing that drives me particularly crazy about modern discourse. So on to my series of rants, and you know, they are broken up into videos. Feel free to watch as many or as few as you wish, and comment if you feel you have something substantive to say. The comment that I most want to see is the one that really makes me go, huh, I really hadn't thought of it that way before. So please, if you think somebody else has that comment somewhere in them, then share the video with them. But this, for me, is the state of the show. Ta-da! Okay.